Scribble notes when I wrote these quotes. If I offend, pardon me, there's more of me to grow. Creative in my process, enjoy the show. The will is different when you recognize the different strokes. Different folks, same goals, we all want the most. So when we reach the top, we can enjoy the toast. The type of bread we get is fresh about the bakery. Told them don't play with me, with or without a degree. Don't question my intensity, bravery. Similar to agencies that want to see you fold. So just pray for me. Einstein with my energy.
Welcome to the Scribble Notes podcast. I'm super excited to talk to you today. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
Can you I'm living the best life. I never really can complain. So it's just always sunshine and roses over here. Why don't you introduce yourself for the listeners and just talk a little about who you are and what you do?
Okay, so my name is Stacey Willis. I do a little bit of everything. I write. I also do graphic design. It's been a process figuring out how to format properly and all that with self-publishing. But I feel like I'm getting better at it as the books go on. I'm currently a university student. I'm studying creative writing, because I want to work in publishing as well.
Awesome. That's pretty dope. Yeah. How long have you been writing for?
The times get funny, right? Because I remember having written something in like 2008, but I only started writing properly in 2015. So, yeah.
Okay. What has inspired you to write? I like to hear people's origin stories and like what got them interested.
I'd say for my first book, it's very obvious what inspired me. I had just finished reading the Percy Jackson series by Rick Riordan, and it just ignited my love for mythology, like all mythologies. But specifically Greek. But otherwise,
a lot of people love Percy Jackson.
Mm-hmm. It's a classic. It's really funny. But mostly my inspiration came from just like going through all the popular books at the time, even like fan fiction, and realizing that what I wanted to read wasn't there. So I just wrote it instead.
Yeah, you like filled that void. It's really cool. Like I was very similar in the sense at one point when what got me into publishing wasn't that like I was, at least for me, I wasn't like, I have to write, but I did have a story that I wanted to tell or a specific story style that I wanted to read. And nothing that I was picking up or looking at or being recommended at the time really gave me that kind of story. And at some point I was like, you know what? Why don't you just write it? Like, why don't you just start writing the world that you want to see? Like, write those type of elements. And it ended up making like the experience a lot more interesting. How was your experience doing that?
Well, if you compare my writing then and my writing now, you'll see there's a lot of influence from like, how would I describe it? Like the writing that you just like do for fun in your spare time, as opposed to writing like properly and professionally. So there was a lot of editing to go through with the first book, but I was pretty happy with it. It blended together a lot of elements that I wasn't seeing in mainstream books. So I was pretty proud of it.
Hey, so you decided to indie publish. I'm also indie published. I talked to a lot of independent authors. What was the thought process behind that decision?
Initially, I did think about traditional publishing, but nothing was happening. So I just thought, kind of wanted this to happen like right now. So I did a little research and decided to just publish it myself. it didn't cost me a lot. So this was before I had a job, by the way. So so money was a very important factor. So I had to think about that. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that like it is so interesting. The timeline that it takes to get your book traditionally published oftentimes is one of the big factors for a lot of authors for why they just self-publish. Because it does take a long time. Even just getting an agent can take months, and then then submitting to different agencies and trying to see, can you get your book picked up by a publisher? Like that will take forever, and then once you do, like then you have to edit with them, and then that takes a while. So like it can be a long process before your book ever actually makes it anywhere. So I definitely,
and a lot of publishers don't they don't accept what's the word,
unsolicited
manuscript. Yeah, you have to get an agent, and that's a whole process in itself. So yeah, I'm currently in that process, but yeah, I haven't heard back from anyone yet because I did this before the holidays.
Yeah, and it's a long process. Like it is a long one. I'm planning on, after I finish this trilogy, on trying to go through the traditional publishing route. I'm going to write a story, a standalone, and then just sit on it and let it go where it needs to. Let it take all the time.
That's exactly what I did as well. There's this one story in particular that I'm trying to query for at the moment. It's the book that I wrote after my first series. It's not a standalone. It's technically a trilogy and then a spin-off. So it's a long one. So it'll probably be more difficult in that sense to get picked up by an agency and a publisher. So
yeah, it's a process, but I think it's worth it. A lot of traditionally published authors I've talked to, when they do get the right connection and the right fit, they like love it just as much work as self-publishing, as far as the marketing side. So that's always fun.
Yeah.
How has marketing and all that stuff been for you as far as like getting your book to readers?
It's been okay. There's a few things that I wish I had known at the start of it before, rather than what I know now, because I've realized that there are effective methods and not so effective methods, and I didn't know of the effective methods before. So now suddenly I have all these readers and who weren't there before, and if I want them to read my books in the future, they have to catch up, which is a mission. So
yeah, what are some of the effective methods that you've learned, or that you've implemented?
Book tours, they really do help. Reaching out to influencers who have a large platform, it really helps. Like just gifting a few free copies for them to promote and stuff. Book tours are definitely one of the big ones.
Yeah, not doing book tours the first time, you've seen a huge difference probably.
Yeah, I have.
It's amazing how especially when it comes to the marketing side of things, there's so much that's unknown before you like get into the space. Like there's just no way to know what would work, what actually works,
exactly,
who to reach out to. Like all of that stuff is so unknown that when you finally do publish a book, you're like, okay, what now? And there's so much now. Like there's still so much marketing that goes on. How
I also wish I had built my platform before I published, because I only did it afterwards, which was a bit silly of me, because I find that gaining a platform prior to releasing a book is very important.
Yeah, building that platform up so that there's some sort of following really does help, because otherwise you're releasing into the air. and helping that people read.
Honestly. Yeah.
So what's your so let's shift gears a little bit. Let's talk about your book. What's it about? What's the quick pitch of it for the listeners?
Right. So the quick pitch is urban fantasy. The first book is young adult, but the second, third, and fourth, and fifth, and sixth, they're all new adult. So things get spicier after the first book. It's contemporary Greek mythology. So main character, Savannah, she discovers that her father is the Greek god of the dead, Hades. And after she gets into a car accident on her birthday, it sets off a chain of events where she has to fight for her right to exist, because children of gods shouldn't exist according to this treaty that the god of oaths made.
So then there's just
That's all I'm
there's nothing but conflict from there. That's what it sounds like. There's nothing but conflict.
It gets resolved, but yeah, the conflict only builds.
As any story. What made you choose Greek?
As I said, Percy Jackson was a huge factor. I really could have gone with any mythology for my debut, but I don't know, I was really feeling Greek. And I had started writing this particular story in 2017. It wasn't a fan fiction at first. It was an original story, but I don't know. I was really loving the Greek characters, and I mean, it's probably the mythology that I'm most familiar with. So it just felt natural to write.
That whole write what you know, right? Like
Yeah.
stick with that piece. And honestly, it is super fun to be able to explore something like that and create these characters to go along with the mythology that you already know, the mythology that you've read and heard and seen. And probably enjoy, right?
Yeah, it's really the research was really fun because they are obviously the gods that we already know, like the Olympians, but then there's a whole host of minor gods for like almost everything under the sun. And you can probably make up a lot as well, because nothing is really set in stone. So I like that little freedom that it has that other mythology normally doesn't have. So yeah, it's been fun.
I can only imagine the amount of research you have to do for Greek mythology. Like it is one of the like most detailed and deep mythologies out there, and so many people have studied it. So you probably got a ton of information during your search.
I did, yeah. It's very complex. The family tree is the worst part, definitely. It can get very confusing. So yeah, I don't like getting into the family tree and who's related to who and how. But it is fun to discover like different myths that I hadn't heard of before. When I was writing.
What is one that was one that you could share right off the top of the head?
Right. So there's this short little story about Apollo, the god of light and music and medicine and all that. And so apparently there was this satyr, that a half man, half goat, that challenged him to this music competition. Now there's different outcomes that people have written about. So there's no right outcome or wrong one. But I decided to go with the most gruesome one. Just to like flesh out his character a bit, because he's very important to the series. Basically what happened was the satyr lost in all versions. One version he didn't cheat. But in the one that he did cheat, Apollo got very upset, or not upset, very enraged, and skinned him.
Oh, what?
Yeah, and hung the skin in an olive tree. So yeah,
What?
they
That's
all
actually
have their
wild.
dark sides.
That is what I've literally never heard this, but
Yeah.
that's one worth listening to. So with that, what's your writing process like? How long are these books?
Okay, so the first one is only 484 pages. It sounds like a lot, but it's actually pretty standard and small. The second one increases that by about 100 pages. And the third one is set to be even longer than that one as well. The process, I'm not sure. I took my time writing the first one, right? And the second one had also already been written by the time I wanted to publish it. I'm only really drafting, in a sense, for the third one. I haven't finished writing it yet. It's due in the middle of the year, but it'll be fine. Usually it takes me about 6 to 9 months to write a book, or draft it rather, before editing begins. Yeah, I mean, I dedicate a lot of time to writing, so I do have a lot of time to do that.
Yeah, writing does take time. I definitely know that. I found myself the last few weeks. I'm trying to finish up this trilogy, and it's interesting to try to find time. I've been like doing all I can to get just small pieces done, and I think I'm on the 4th chapter. It's gonna have 24 or 25 chapters, so I feel like I'm making good progress through the story. Are you a plotter or a pantser? Because I'm definitely a plotter. I know exactly how many chapters I'm going to have in this book.
I'm a bit of both. When I start a book, yeah, when I start a book, I have the plot in mind, but I don't usually write it down in detail. I leave room for just writing and going for it. Just whatever pops up, just keep the ball rolling. I write little snippets of little chapters out of order and then try and mesh them together. I don't know. When inspiration hits, I just
go with it.
Yeah.
I must be weird that like I write in sequence. Like I have such a hard time writing out of order that it's ridiculous. Like I just need to know.
I mean, sometimes my brain will be like, "Oh, that's a really exciting part. Why don't we write that right now?" and then build up to it.
You're like, oh,
so when I'm typing it out, I'll write in sequence. When I'm typing it out. But when I like write my notes down, I'll have written like chapter 40 before I've even written down chapter 4. So,
I love it. There's so many different ways to write, and I think anyone that's listening, you don't have to take one specific path. Whatever works for you works
Absolutely.
for you. And especially when you really want to write something, I found myself, I write a lot of dialogue. Like a conversation comes and I'm like, all right, this is it. We have it. We have exactly what's going to happen. And then I have to write the conversation. So I have tons of dialogue written in my phone that I then email to myself because I'm like, that's going to go into the book. It's just not in any of the sections I'm currently writing. So I do that. It's hard for me to write scenes though, because I feel pressure to then get there. And I'm like, I don't know how we about to get there, especially if I just have fun with it.
I don't favor dialogue over prose, but I find that with the snippets that I do write out of order, it's mostly prose. Dialogue only comes when it's important to the scene, I suppose. But yeah,
I feel that. I find myself. Do you jot down words? Like you hear words and you're like, oh, that's a really good one.
Yes, I absolutely do. I have this entire section in my notes. I call it the Thesaurus of useful words. And it's just a long list of words I've picked up from reading or other people have just said them. or other people have gone out of their way to look for synonyms, and I'm just like, oh my god, I have to use that at some point.
Yes, I'm the same way. I feel like whenever I read and someone like says, if an author uses a word that I otherwise would probably not have thought of, I'm like, that's an interesting way to use it. I think an author used the word chubby. They said chubby, like describing somebody. And I was like, I don't use chubby enough. I should write chubby in my story. And it was just like random. But I'm like, I think
I've only used that word like once.
Yeah, I was like, I need to put chubby in there. Like it happens to me so often that I find myself constantly doing it. And I have the same type of thing. I have one note that has all of these words. I'm literally scrolling so far just to add new ones. And then I use it, and I use it all the time. So like when I'm writing,
I've actually found with these new words that I find, they've become like frequenters in my manuscripts. So they're not even rare anymore.
They're not even special.
Exactly. It's just become part of my vocabulary.
Yeah, just part of it now. Which is amazing.
When I say them out loud, my sister's always like, what in the world does that mean?
It's like I'm well read at this point.
Yep.
I'm an author. So when let's shift gears a little bit more. I want to give you a chance to give some tips. So writer's block. Let's talk about writer's block. Have you experienced writer's block? What do you think about writer's block? I have strong opinions on writer's block, but I want to know yours.
Okay, so yes, I do get writer's block very often, but it's never been that huge of a deal because I constantly have all these ideas running through my head, written in my notes. So whenever I feel like I can't write for one story, I start on another. I know it might sound confusing, but it's very easy for me to abandon one idea for the moment and get into another one. And they're completely different. I don't know how it is, but it works for me. So if I don't feel like writing at all, then I read. Reading always helps. It really does.
Yeah, I like that because one, you still write. So my big thing about writer's block is I don't necessarily believe that you just can't write at all. I always tell people like it's okay to write poorly. Like you could just write it bad. Like when I don't know what to do or if I don't know how to describe something, I just describe it really badly. Like, yeah, I don't know how to. This is a wood table. That's the best I got. So they sat on a wood table. I'm like, all right, we're gonna get through this scene, and I'll go fix it later.
Unfortunately, I can't do that. I can't be like, no, I have to come back to this. I absolutely have to fix it right then and there, or I will forget. So I'll be like scrambling around trying to find synonyms, literally any other way to describe something.
A quick Google search of words.
Yeah,
I do that a ton. I feel like that's half the time I'm writing. I'm like, I use this word already. Gotta find a new one.
Exactly.
Comes up so often. But yeah, I'm big like writer's block. I always think that there's a piece of it that's psychological, like, oh, I can't write. But I think the point you made, you just start writing something else or reading. So you find a way to kind of, I think, reset your brain. I think sometimes if you're writing a lot, it becomes really, really tough to just keep going and keeping it fresh. I think is a really hard thing.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's like how do you keep something fresh if you're doing it for days and hours on end? At some point, you're gonna start feeling repetitive, and that's when it's like give yourself a break.
On that note, if you are working on a manuscript that you're quite far into, but you can't seem to like continue, I recommend going back and just like going through the whole thing again. Not really editing, but like reading through it. It may spark ideas. I know it's helped me a lot. And sometimes I even read back and I'm like, did I really write that? Like I surprised myself a few chapters before.
You're like, I'm good.
Or bad.
Or I'm bad. That's me when I
And
read
then
my
I
first book
immediately have to
sometimes.
fix it.
Yeah, my first book, I'm like, oh gosh, we gotta remaster this one. It just makes me feel that way sometimes. So we talked about some tips, some things that you've done for your writing process. What kind of advice do you give somebody that wants to write books but has a hard time finding time or finding the right idea? Let's go with the right idea. Like, I know a lot of people will be like, I just don't think I have anything worth saying or writing, but they want to be a writer. What kind of tips do
I
you give
think
them?
that everyone has something worth saying. And I don't say this lightly, because I find that a lot of people have a lot of ideas that aren't actually on the market, or if they are, nobody knows about them. And I find it a bit sad that there's all these fresh ideas that everyone's completely ignoring because everybody loves the cliches, right? But I just say absolutely go for it, because there is someone out there who is going to want to read it.
Yeah, there's always a place for the story. And I think the first time, at least in my own experience, publishing the first time, I felt like, oh, no one's gonna read this except people I know. And then there was someone that did read it that I didn't know. And I was like, whoa, how did they find my book? I did some promotion and stuff. I was like, they found it. And then they enjoyed it, which was really cool. They loved the story.
I always find it so satisfying when a complete stranger absolutely loves your work.
You're like,
I don't know. It means more because they don't know you, and yeah, they have no bias, I guess.
Yeah, they have no obligation to enjoy what you wrote, and it was a really cool feeling. I remember the first time, and I was like, wow, they really did like it. And then the second book that I came out with, they liked that one even more, and I was like, wow, I must really be getting better since they said it.
Yeah, that's what happened to me as well.
And that's a great feeling. How have you how's it been for you experiencing feedback from fans and other readers?
I don't want this to come across as bragging, but most of the reviews are really positive and glowing. There's constructive criticism, obviously, which I'm always open to. I think I've only received one star. The reader didn't finish it, and they were confused, and I realized it was because they hadn't read the first book first.
That's a way to read.
I don't even know
order.
if they realized that they hadn't read the first book first. So yeah, those are really the only negative reviews I've ever gotten, which has really made me feel honored, actually, because there are times when I doubt my own ability and I'm like, oh, is this really good enough to actually be a book? But readers are really encouraging.
Yeah, it's an awesome feeling. And I echo all the things you just said, because the first time you do get a positive review and you start to see oh, wow, people really did enjoy this. And then the constructive feedback, right? Learning what ways you can even be better. It's so hard for, I think anyone that's listening, it's so hard for an author to know what they can do better, because
it is
we spend forever with the
someone
book.
Points it out. Yeah. Until someone points it out, we never know how to fix a scene.
And we couldn't fix the scene. I remember pacing was one of those things, right? When you're first writing, you're like, okay, I'm gonna write this scene, but you have a feel for how long you want it to go, when you want it to be finished. And sometimes you'll finish a scene way too soon, right? You need more. Other times it's this has been dragging on. And you're like, I think I thought it was perfect, which is why I wrote it this way. But someone gives you feedback, and then that feedback is then what you apply to kind of fix it and make it better.
Exactly. Yeah.
And throughout an entire book, that's where the fun comes. I get to learn more from the first book and the second book's feedback that then helps me and informs me on the next book. And And as
Exactly, yeah.
you're an author, the more you write, obviously the better you become at doing the writing, because you start to learn so
Precisely.
many more little lessons. So I was gonna ask, what ways have you grown as an author?
Well, definitely my writing. I don't even need customer reviews to know that uh, my writing has improved since the first draft to the one that I'm writing now. I'd say the style has changed a little bit as well, because the first one was very modern and very 21st century. So the dialogue was very relaxed, and the narrative was a little simpler than it is now, where it's venturing into light fantasy, because they're not always on Earth. So, yeah. I don't know. I think I've grown in the way that I do market as well. Yeah, my marketing techniques have grown, improved. I've learned the tactics now.
Learn things to actually do, things to
Yeah,
actually work.
exactly. I don't know. There's a lot more that I want to do still, but I can only really do it once I have secured a job and saved up. So can't do that right now. But yeah, I'm always plotting on what to do next.
Yeah, the never-ending journey, the growth of becoming an author, becoming a published writer, it just doesn't stop. I was gonna ask,
Nope.
we're coming up on the end of our time, but I did want to ask you another question just about writing. Like, this is gonna be a weird one, but I feel like you got an answer to this. So when you're writing, do you ever get stuck? Like, have you ever written yourself into a corner and then been like, okay, how do we figure a way out of this for the characters? I know for myself, I have done this many times where I'm like, this is what happened. This is what the characters are going to do. And now I have to figure out a solution that I currently don't have. In my second book, there was one scene in particular where I had a character accidentally kill somebody. And then I was like, oh no, I don't know how they're supposed to make it out of this situation. I just wrote the scene first. So then after that, I had to figure out something cool. And then I had a great feeling about me being clever and how I did it. So have you had any situations like that?
Yes, I absolutely have. I don't know, spontaneous resolution, I guess you could call it.
That's
At
the
the end,
perfect way to describe it. Spontaneous resolution.
At the end of the first book, so the villain's death was planned out, and its consequences. But one death, which I won't spoil, was not planned. And I don't know, I was just writing and then suddenly they were dead. I had to figure out for what purpose and like what would it add exactly, and would they come back in any form? They do come back, but it's only to like answer questions. I have read a review where someone said that it did feel at first a bit thrown in there, and it makes complete sense, obviously. But them coming back did help to explain why they were just suddenly cut off. They weren't supposed to be, but I mean, it happens.
It happens.
It happens.
The way writing goes. I always like to hear how other people handle it, because there are so many times where you could just write something and be like, this was amazing. I love the thing that we did here, but I just don't know what next, because this wasn't
exactly
planned.
Yeah. I just love the power that comes with writing, that you can just take the story in a completely new direction, and you can add new people, remove people, and no one can tell you not to.
Who walks through the
And your
door?
readers just have to deal with it.
Who walks through the door is what I always think.
Exactly.
Like, all right, random person walks through the door, and it could be literally anyone. And now we start seeing.
Like in the third book that I'm writing now, some people have already read I think up to chapter 6. And they've been introduced to this new character that showed up at the end of book 2. We don't know much about him yet, but he's pretty morally gray. And in my head, I thought that people might like that, right? Because it's a trend. But the opposite happened, and now almost nobody likes him at all. And I have no idea what to do. Like, how do I redeem him just a little bit to make it like he's not the villain of the story, not at all. He's a love interest, and he needs to be a good person because his love interest is, well, okay, they try to be a good person. So I need them to like work together in that, but nobody is liking him right now.
So that's the new resolution, the new spontaneous resolution that's needed.
Yeah.
This has been awesome. Can you drop your links? Where can people find you online? Where can people connect, and where can they buy your books?
Right. So I'm on Instagram and Twitter, and you can look on my author's website, which is author StaceyWillis.com. There you can find all the links. But all of my books can be found on Amazon. I'm on Goodreads as well. And you can find the first book in Barnes and Noble. Well, not in Barnes and Noble, on Barnes and Noble.
On Barnes and Noble's website.
Yeah. And Book Depository as well. I know they ship worldwide, so you can find it there as well. And it's all listed underneath the individual links, so you can find exactly where to find them. The second book will also be introducing wider reach as well, but the hardcover is only coming in February, so sit tight for that.
Awesome. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. This has been a joy to speak to you today.
Thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. And for the listeners, thank you for listening. You know what to do. Like the video, subscribe. That would be awesome. And peace out until next time.
Scribble notes when I wrote these quotes. If I offend, pardon me, there's more of me to grow. Creative in my process, enjoy the show. The will is different when you recognize the different strokes. Different folks, same goals, we all want the most. So when we reach the top, we can enjoy the toast. The type of bread we get is fresh about the bakery. Told them don't play with me, with or without a degree. Don't question my intensity, bravery. Similar to agencies that want to see you fold. So just pray for me. Yeah, Einstein with my energy.